being tasked to kill a princess who is seemingly extremely dangerous and could bring about the end of the world. The protagonist finds himself in a situation where he has to trust the words of someone telling him not to question this mission and to ignore the cries and the explanations of the princess, as she can be very convincing and deceptive, or whether to listen to the princess who does in fact act suspicious and to trust her, unsure to whether she will in fact cause the end of the world or not. Hi folks, I'm R, and welcome to a story which makes you critically think about the possible consequences of your actions, confused who to trust and who to doubt. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers, and with that said, let's begin.
You're on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path is a cabin. And in the basement of that cabin is a princess. You're here to slay her. If you don't, it will be the end of the world.
The protagonist of the story finds himself in the middle of the woods on the right trail leading to a cabin where a princess is locked up in its basement. As he follows through, a strange voice known as the narrator explains that the protagonist is there to slay this princess, as otherwise it would be the end of the world. With not much more context given, it's soon revealed that the protagonist can clearly hear the narrator, who doesn't question why there's a voice instructing him to slay a princess. In fact, the protagonist doesn't even ask why he's in the forest and how he ended up there. It all seems as if they were meant to be, and the fact that the narrator is heard so openly, it shows how that it's part of the protagonist's existence. It's a norm that he's used to, a way of life he doesn't know any different.
The more specifics you have, the harder it will be for you to do this very important job. She's a princess. People will listen to her, because listening to her is in their nature, and when they do, everything will come crashing down.
As the protagonist dares to challenge the narrator by asking him why he should do what he's asked, the narrator becomes manipulative and deflects the questions, giving short answers with no specifics. As the protagonist asks why the princess is dangerous enough to end the world, the narrator explains that she's not dangerous. Her leave from the cabin would just simply bring about the end of the world, something that he leaves vague and unexplained. The narrator goes on informing the protagonist that he shouldn't ask any more questions, and lingering on the matter only delays the process and could potentially deter him from doing the deed, as questions only create doubt, an argument that has been used many times before to easily manipulate others, as prevention of critical thinking and open discussion always leads to subjugated subjects.
And before you decide to waste even more of our time by asking how I know that, let me suggest a more pragmatic lens through which to view this situation. Causality doesn't matter here, because the end result is the same no matter what led us up to this point. If the princess leaves the cabin, the world will end, and there is no changing that. It's no use arguing semantics over a metaphorical chicken or egg, because the egg is hatched and it's about to ruin everything. Unless, of course, you do your job and slay her.
The narrator continues by mentioning that causality doesn't matter of how they ended here and why they need to slay the princess. The only thing that matters is the result, which is the world ending if the princess leaves, which creates an ambiguous premise that it might not be the princess that would intentionally end the world, but her existence in the world would bring it to a stop, as if the world would break, having an entity such as the princess present within it. The narrator then clearly goes on to explain his role in the story, being someone who is in no position to change any aspect of the story, but to instruct the protagonist to his ultimate fate. As the protagonist follows the path, he finally comes across a well-lit cabin atop a hill, which is the cabin the princess is locked within. As he tries to climb the hill, another voice is heard as the voice of the hero, with it acting heroic, how cliché and stereotypical heroes in stories would act, explaining that they shouldn't slay any princesses, that they in fact are supposed to save them, as this is a written duty of a hero in stories, with the hero saving princesses and fighting their imprisoners, hence why the hero is shocked to the premise.
We're not going to go through with this, right? She's a princess. We're supposed to save princesses, not slay them. Ignore him. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Just before getting to the cabin, the narrator warns the protagonist not to fall for the princess's lies and deceptive antics, as she will try to get out of being slain. There seems to be a way dictators and cruel people manipulated their subjects not to think and give the victims a chance to defend themselves. So whatever the cause or crime, even if non-existent, the victims would suffer a fate of unjustified death. Entering the cabin, the protagonist observes his surroundings, finding a conveniently placed dagger on a table next to the basement door. The dagger is in a pristine condition, as if it has been welded specially for the protagonist to use on the princess, as if the entire mission is a mere staged ritual for someone to be sacrificed and the protagonist to be manipulated, as if it's all a well-written script for a movie or a test which is being enforced by the narrator. The protagonist, being a foolish man, follows the narrator's instructions and picks up the knife, heading down the basement.
The door to the basement creaks open, revealing a staircase faintly illuminated by an unseen light in the room below. This is an oppressive place. The air feels heavy and damp, a hint of rot filtering from the ancient wood. If the princess really lives here, slaying her is probably doing her a favor. Her voice carries up the stairs.
Who's there?
It's commanding, almost as though she's the one in charge down here.
As the protagonist notices the lack of light and the poor conditions the staircase is in, the narrator explains how they will do the princess a favor by killing her, as this place is putrid, with oppressive atmosphere, damp, and heavy air. A female voice in an assertive manner is heard asking who's coming down, which causes the hero to doubt himself. Going down and observing a young princess bound to a heavy chain to one side of the wall, the hero explains how her beauty is enchanting and mesmerizing, someone who wouldn't be capable of ending the world. As the princess notices the knife, she asks if the protagonist is there to kill her.
Oh? No talking then? Fine. What even makes you think you can kill me? I'm probably chained up in this basement for a reason, right? And if that knife is the only weapon you have, you'll have to get close enough to use it. So, you should just drop it. Best not to risk finding out what I can do.
The protagonist, on the other hand, being determined, approaches her when the princess goes on explaining that the protagonist should tread lightly, as she might be chained there for a reason, and might in fact be dangerous. Just as the princess is about to say something else, trying to dissuade the protagonist from killing her, he lunges at her and in a split second plunges the knife in her chest before she could even react. The princess, not being too fazed about her death, slowly dying in cold blood, being unheard, explains with her last breath that this isn't enough to kill her. When the life leaves her body, lying in the dark and damp stone-paved basement motionlessly, as the protagonist, feeling a weight dropped from his chest, feeling empty, as if he's been relieved from his duties forever, stares at the princess's corpse, when he starts to make his way up to the cabin, deciding to leave. As he opens the main door to go back to the forest, he observes nothingness, a void where the lush forest used to stand. Confused to what is going on, he closes the door, going back to the cabin, with the narrator explaining that he's been relieved of his duties, a blissful end where he can be happy, just existing, with nothing to do, no time passing anymore, just being stuck in a cabin, with him even forgetting the meaning of the words, just simply existing.
Only, a world saved from certain doom isn't what you find. Instead, what you find is nothing at all. Where a lush forest stood mere minutes ago, the only thing in front of you now is the vast emptiness of space. What happened? Everyone is fine. It's just that you and the cabin are now far away from. Don't worry. You'll be safe here. This is good. Everyone is happy. You'll be happy. This isn't an ending. In fact, now that the princess has been slain, endings are a thing of the past. No. This is the beginning of eternity. Your reward.
As the protagonist stays in the cabin, decades pass, with him slowly going into a state of trance, just having pure existence. No need to eat, dream, move, breathe, or even think. This leads to the good ending, an ending where the protagonist completed the mission he was tasked with, a mission to slay the princess and just simply exist in the never-ending void where he will be forgotten, even himself forgetting himself. This portrays how the game characters were to some degree self-aware, knowing full well their existence depends on doing what they're supposed to do, the narrator being tasked to narrate the story as it's supposed to be, hence why he would be manipulative when the protagonist wanted to do something outside of the script. The hero was a stereotypical hero found in every fairy tale with a happy ever after, always there to save the princess. The princess was there to act as a princess and simply just die. And for the protagonist, his role was a little ambiguous, and he did exactly as he was supposed to do. It all was part of the plan. That is why the knife was conveniently placed in the cabin, seemingly being recently welded. It was there for the protagonist to use on the princess and kill her. She simply couldn't leave the cabin, as her departure would cause the end of the world that is present within the game, a world that the narrator, the protagonist and the hero, and even the princess are part of. But their existence only depends on whether they perform their respective roles or not. The princess is written and bound to be in the basement for as long as she remembers, as if she manages to leave, she would simply break the game, bringing an end to it. If the protagonist was not to perform this task and not to go to the cabin, he would also break the game, which is seen in one of the endings known as the Stranger. Something I will talk in depth about in a different video. The narrator is supposed to narrate the story and guide the protagonist to his fate, hence why he explained he cannot change the protagonist with someone else doing his job. And finally, at the end, the protagonist just goes into a pure form of existence, detached from the rest of the world in the game, thrown into a void alongside the cabin, the voice of the hero, which slowly fades away as it's not needed anymore for any princess, and finally the narrator, who narrates until the very end, the end of the story of the protagonist.
More happy time passes, though the word begins to lose its meaning. Time, that is, not happy. Happy still has plenty of meaning. Please shake yourself out of it. We have to get out of here. The little voices please fall on deaf ears. Eventually you pass into a blissful state of pure existence. Though words like eventually and pass ceased to have any meaning to you long before that shift, you simply exist. Happy. Forever.
The narrator itself also slowly disappears, as it is bound to the protagonist and until he is relieved of his duties. The game portrays the limitations of games, even in a multi-ending one, containing thousands of words and multiple different options in dialogues. Doesn't matter how big, they are always limited. As the narrator explained, the causality doesn't matter, it's only the result that does. Doesn't matter how the game is played or how many different routes are taken, the result is the same and it leads to one place, the end. No matter how many endings a game has, it always leads to an end, a conclusion, and it's limited just to that. Achieving the other endings, it's revealed how despite all of the protagonist's efforts, it always leads to the same ending, with the princess dying, and if she doesn't die, the protagonist does, or if neither do, the game breaks, which ends both of them at the end. I will make a subsequent video explaining the other 6 endings, so 7 endings in total. And that's it for the end of this video, folks. If you enjoyed it, make sure to stay tuned as I'm planning to make a subsequent video explaining the rest of the endings. As always, it's been your host Star. Until the next video, have a fantastic day.